Jessica, it's time once again to do the thing we call DNF, this podcast. You were hearing the voice of Spencer Hall, and joining me as always is Jessica Smetana. We are here to talk about things that go vroom in the night or very early morning. If
spooky.
You like Suzuka, which is the coolest track. Absolutely, like maybe my favorite. I don't have a favorite, but it's close.
It was so jarring to see it in the daylight, like in sunshine this year after last year's debacle, Spencer. It was gorgeous. I enjoyed every second of this. Stayed up late to watch most of it and then finished it Sunday. But I think the start time was like 1 o'clock Eastern. And luckily I was still awake eating my feelings about Notre Dame losing to Ohio State. So it was a nice little distraction on my drive home.
Yeah, this is actually, before we talk about the particulars of the race, I think you need to know the story for anyone watching it here in the States. It came at the end of a tremendously long sporting day. If you were a person who has more than one interest, there was Premier League in the morning. You could get your soccer in the morning. Then it jumped right into a very long day of college football, which is, my bailiwick and yours as well. And then in the middle of it, there was a Rugby World Cup game. If you're following Rugby World Cup,
Ireland won.
A banger
of
a game between two titans, Ireland and South Africa. And then if you somehow made it to even the late football game, lying in wait at the end, which this is what happened to me and why I'm telling the story, lying in wait at the end was the Japanese Grand Prix, which I said, I'm not going to stay up and watch. No. It won't be interesting.
No way.
Max will just pull away. I'll be so tired. There's no way my brain will keep me awake for that. Jessica, I was wrong. I was completely wrong. I watched it.
Well, I think last year was the year that Max won during this race, and no one knew until too far afterwards for it to like kind of sink in any way. This year, and I should say he won like the driver's championship in Suzuka at Suzuka last year, and everyone was like, wait, did he win? Did he not win? Because they did like this weird thing with laps because of the rain. This year he won, and we officially now can say Red Bull are the constructors champions, and Max has to finish the sprint race at the next race in at least third place, and he will clinch the drivers championship, I believe. So similar outcome as last year, but a whole lot of weird, crazy stuff that happened. We're going to talk about Sergio Perez and what has been a disastrous last couple months. We're going to talk about Logan Sergeant. Spencer not doing so hot in the Williams seat.
If you want to know a sign that things were off from the beginning here in this race, it's when Valtteri Bottas in the first 2 laps was like, yeah, it ain't working. It's not happening. And that's when he's kind of my bellwether for how a race goes. Even if he's back in like 18th, you're like, things seem to be pretty normal.
Yeah.
If Bottas goes out, all of a sudden other people start dropping like flies. We had 5 DNFs. A tribute, which is a loving tribute to us, but 5 in this race, including, you would think, oh man, Verstappen did well. Surely Checo Perez followed suit and excelled in similar fashion. I have news for you. No.
He both DNF'd and then un-DNF'd and then re-DNF'd.
play that out for anybody not fortunate enough to see that.
Yeah, so he started in 5th place, got into a collision on the first lap with Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz. Then he passed Fernando Alonso under caution going into the pit lane to get his car repaired. And so then after he left the pit lane, they gave him the 5-second penalty. So he knew he had to like go back in and serve the penalty, because if you don't serve the penalty, you get a penalty for the next race. So then he went back into the pit to serve the penalty, and then he came out and crashed into Kevin Magnussen, which I think it's fair to say was entirely his bad. Yeah. I don't think K-Mag really, like, some of these racing incidents, you can be like, okay, well, he did this slightly wrong, and then he did that, and then this is blah, blah, blah.
Well,
No,
that's why we
this,
have this very polite term called racing incident, meaning
right,
we're all trying really hard and sometimes shit happens.
right.
That's what racing incident means.
So then he went back into the pit. They retired his car. And then 41 minutes later, he came back out and they had him serve another penalty for the full 10 seconds. And then basically brought him back in on lap 43 and officially retired him for the rest of the race.
Uh-huh.
Like, if you were not watching this, I could see how that sounds very confusing because it was, even if you were watching it. It was so weird. And I think they did it all to avoid him getting a big grid penalty for the next race. So I think it's probably a smart call, but I don't think many people who watch Formula One knew that you could unretire a car in the middle of a race because I certainly didn't know that. And I've been watching like 3 seasons of F1 now. I don't think I've seen that happen before.
Yeah, a bizarre race for him. It just by any definition of the term, and a real. If you think about it, in terms of drivers who've had intriguing stories this year, I'm not saying successful. I'm saying intriguing because 2 months ago there was a bit of buzz about, well, I don't know, maybe Perez can push Verstappen. Maybe we've got in a sort of desperate grasp at any kind of storyline. We were like, maybe Checo's going to be Verstappen's rival, and we'll have this sort of intra-team rivalry. Ooh, and boy, that has not been the case
Not
at
at
all.
all. And it seems like very likely that this will not end well for Sergio Perez at Red Bull.
Yeah,
And he seems to have like he's just not driving well. The last few races he's made some really weird mistakes and has seemed completely bothered by everything that's going on there. And it's kind of sad because I think he's a lot of Formula One fans' favorite drivers. And then to see
yeah.
him come out and make all these mistakes that it just seems like his head's not in it or something is bothering him, right? It's like very uncharacteristic of him and very unfun to watch.
Yeah. Let's talk about something a little bit happier, which is let's talk about my second favorite color, orange.
Mm,
First
yeah.
being blue, but for second
Bears
being
fan.
or
Mets fan?
you're a terrible person. Go Gators.
Oh, okay.
But orange, that is to say, you go, oh, Verstappen, the Dutchman. No, we're talking about McLaren.
McLaren.
That's right. We're talking about McLaren. We're talking about another amazing storyline because McLaren, who started off the season again in an absolute shambles and owning it, like not just in a shambles, but Zach Brown going like, yeah, we messed up. We messed up super bad. Recovering to the point where they not only podiumed, but went 2-3 after being an absolute disaster to start the season.
Yeah. And Oscar Piastri got his first podium in Formula One. And I
Good
think you
for
have to
him.
give them a lot of credit because Lando Norris, if you can recall from the first half of the season, was not happy with how this car was driving. And there was a lot of like consternation among his camp about his future with McLaren. But they still raced every race, finished poorly in all of them. And then as soon as the upgrade came, you saw the results. And McLaren, like they admitted from early in the season, like we know we screwed up. Like you said, we fixed it. You won't be able to tell that we fixed it for a few months, so just hang in there. And I think for the fans that hung in there and were hoping this would happen, like this is the payoff. These are the results. They are extremely fast, consistently. They've now Lando has now podiumed the last 2 races in a row in Singapore and Japan, finished in second. In Silverstone and Hungary, he also finished in second in those back-to-back races. And then in between, they've been driving close to the Mercedes and the Ferraris. And that is a stark contrast from earlier in the season when the first 2 races, they were like the last 2 cars on the grid.
Yeah. If you were to take a driver, by the way, independent of car right now, independent of performance, and you could not take Max Verstappen, your first pick, it might be Lando Norris.
He's a
Like
very good driver.
the prophecy, right? The chosen one. The king who was to be.
The prince who was promised.
The prince who was promised. The story might be unfolding.
I think you could make an argument going into next season, and maybe this is recency bias because George Russell has had some a couple rough ones in a row. Um,
This is by the way, George's. This is his Daffy Duck race, right?
yeah.
And by that I mean it was. I thought I was the star. I thought I was
I'm
going
the
to get
special
top billing.
boy.
Yeah,
Yeah, his radio well, okay, we'll get into this. George's radio messages, like if you were not really paying attention to all of that, like it seemed like probably he had a fine race, like nothing went catastrophically wrong like last weekend, but the
yeah.
entire race he was so concerned with Lewis Hamilton and getting a better finish, having a better finish than Lewis Hamilton, that it completely took away from like anything else that was going on.
Hmm.
And Lewis has had better pace. He's just been faster than George the entire season, right? So like if you're a Mercedes or a Hamilton fan, you're like, what is this guy doing? Why is he doing this? If you're a Russell fan, like maybe you think it's your turn, but it's not your turn if you're not driving faster than your teammate week to week.
It's not, and it's also not great if other people are passing you because of the decisions that you and your team have made regarding tires. Piastri blasted past him last in the race, largely because
The one
Piastri was on.
stop.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
on fresher. He was on fresher kicks. He was definitely like in better condition tire wise, and then as if the Daffy ducking weren't complete, ended up getting passed again and again to end
Yeah.
up finishing, I believe, 7th on the day, and very vocal about it too. Like this is another thing where I go, George, we got to stop making rookie mistakes. You got to stop actually saying how you feel on the radio, right? Make your decisions, do what you got to do,
Yeah.
but don't spill it.
I don't think it's very endearing. I don't think that people hear it and are like on his side about it, right?
Yeah, this is where let's work a listener question in here because I
Okay.
think it's valid to what we're talking about. From at Darth Dream, did George have a right to be mad when his pace was slower, strategy was worse? Only at himself,
Yeah.
right? Maybe take it up with the team later, but sometimes you have a bad one, and how you handle that bad one affects the next one. So if and you do work even in F1, even when you only have two drivers on a team, we all know that ain't the team. The entire team is engineers, your pit crew, management, everything. You can't do that. Like you really can't. You have to be exact in what you're saying, and you got to be precise. Lewis is a great example of this, by the way. Lewis is the kind of guy who over time really earned the right to sort of occasionally be snippy, because I think everyone knew that and knows that Lewis's heart is in the right place and that he's very, very exact about what he wants. But you should be. It's a sport of precision.
Hmm.
I don't think George has that kind of status yet.
I think George, it just seems like he cares so much about beating Lewis that he kind of sacrifices his place in the race just to prove that he's the faster Mercedes driver
Yeah.
sometimes. Um, and yeah, he's just made some really weird mistakes the last few weeks. I mean, kind of like what we're saying with Sergio Perez, where like it seems like he's not having the season he expected to have. And after last year, when George was dubbed the best lad, he was extremely consistent. He was finishing top 5 every single race. I think this has been a little bit of like him crashing down to earth and realizing like this is a lot harder when the other cars are also fast and kind of on pace with us. And
Yeah.
he still has to compete against Lewis Hamilton, who is one of the best Formula One drivers in the entire history of the sport. So it's definitely difficult, which is why earlier I was going to say when we were talking about the McLarens, maybe Lando and Oscar Piastri are the best 2 drivers right now on a team. I think that's
Hmm.
like you can make an argument for the Ferraris, but after the last couple weeks with the Mercedes, watching the Mercedes, I'm like, I'm a little worried for George. I'm a little worried for him. He's still very good, but I think he needs to like kind of take a deep breath for a minute.
It's an anxious man. You wouldn't expect that. But yeah, George seems at the moment, George seems a bit anxious. You know, the opposite of anxious is, and I'm going to like 2 guys in particular. This is from Emil C. McClellan. At what point? I'm sorry. This is from formerly Heck. Did silly season have more surprises in store other than Checo? Do you see anyone's? I'm going to say remaining contract being bought out. This is where I wanted to remind everybody that speaking of chill, we both have Danny Rick and Yuki Tsunoda being re-up for 2024. DGAF bros, unite, right? Put your hands lazily in the air. Guys who just kind of look sometimes like they don't care, but are so good at their jobs it doesn't matter. I'm thrilled to have both of them back. Danny Ricciardo is my favorite. He has my favorite position, which is the ex-boyfriend position. You can bring him on a team. You can have him in reserve. And when things with your standard driver don't look too great, you can be like, you know who I miss? I miss Danny. I miss Danny. He's right there.
What's he up to?
What's he up to? He looks great. You seen him? He looks
think he's
great.
In town this week for Thanksgiving? Should I text him?
We could have him over.
Go to a local bar.
Wouldn't be weird, would it?
That brings up the question of what to do with Liam Lawson, though, who's actually had a pretty solid start with AlphaTauri, replacing Daniel Ricciardo. Finished in 11th in Japan this weekend and finished in the points last weekend. So he's like driving pretty decently. I think if you take the four, we'll call them like rookies, but include Nick DeVries, who is no longer racing in Formula One, Logan Sergeant, who may no longer be racing in Formula One, TBD what happens with him, and Lawson and Piastri. I think Piastri is the obvious best one. He literally, Alpine and McLaren were fighting over him because he was so good, and they knew he would be good. So that's not really a surprise. But Liam Lawson has been like pretty solid in this car for the last 4 races, and there's a smaller sample size for sure. But it's interesting to see if he gets left out next year from having a seat.
Yeah, there's a rumor that Lawson is guaranteed a spot on the 25 field if he sits out the 24 season as a reserve driver. That's from the Red Bull AlphaTauri conglomerate in general. That seems to be like a weird deal to me, especially given we were just talking about George Russell and patience. F1 drivers, not the most patient people when it comes to career prospects, for better or for worse. See Daniel Ricciardo and consistent and persistent team jumping. That might be the case. He's a hot commodity. Williams is always right there. Williams is always right there to be like, hey, do you want to prove that you're a great driver? Do you want a great car? I can offer you one of these things. That's it. And so he's right there. It's a great story. I think when people say this has been a boring season, valid critiques in terms of the number one spot and the outcomes of races at the top, in terms of actual sort of, internecine drama between teams and drivers coming up. There's a lot of really good talent, a lot of good young talent that really, I think, over the next couple of years, you're going to see put in some amazing positions. I think that's the most interesting thing for me. This is a developmental year. It is the second part of a trilogy, right? This is the part where we develop
2 towers.
Yes, it is the 2 towers. It is your Empire Strikes Back. It is we are going to establish some difficult stuff so that it pays off in the third installment.
I'm wearing my Lord of the Rings shirt right now, actually.
Nice.
Yeah. Anywho, also shout out to Doug. I feel like I forgot to mention this, but Doug brought me back Lord of the Rings merch from New Zealand, and it's too nice for me to use. It's like dish towels with Rivendell and Hobbiton on it.
Yeah.
And I'm never gonna like wipe up a dirty counter with that, so they're just on display right now. Anyways,
put that with the fine china.
Exactly. I want to, now that you mentioned young drivers and we've talked about Logan Sergeant briefly, this is from Trash Takes. Is it time to demote him to Logan Lieutenant? Spencer, other than the, I think, mistaken rank, right? Isn't Lieutenant higher than Sergeant? I'm not sure.
Lieutenant is officer. Sergeant is, non-officer.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say
yes or no?
we would demote him. We would not demote him to lieutenant.
Private? Was he?
We would demote him to Logan Private. Yeah.
Logan Corporal.
Logan Corporal would also be a lower rank. I'm going to be gentle with him.
I haven't seen NCIS in a while, so
yeah, we'll take him down to Logan Private for the moment.
Okay. Logan Private. Yeah. So he crashed in the first lap of qualifying, and his car was so badly damaged that Williams had to create a third car, a mystery third car, use a third chassis to reconstruct his car, got penalized for it. Dave Robson, who's the Williams head of vehicle performance, said when asked what they had to replace, almost everything. It will have a spare chassis, spare power unit, a previously used one, so no additional penalty, a spare gearbox, same thing, a previously used one, floor, rear wing, front wing.
Okay, let's be. I'm gonna try to
That's
do
the whole
some.
car. Can you name something that he didn't say that's like part of a car?
Uh,
The steering wheel? I don't know.
yeah, maybe the wheel. That would be actually, who knows? Maybe they
Yeah.
didn't have to replace that.
I don't know.
Let's. I'm gonna do something that doesn't come naturally to me. I'm gonna try to be kind.
Oh.
So let's do this. Logan Sergeant began the year consistently lingering around that like 18 to 20 spot in DNFing. Now, as the year has gone on, since he DNF'd at Canada, he's 13th, 11th, 13th, 14th. The performance has been more consistent. I don't think his actual racing is the problem. I really, in this sense, like if he's on the track, he's good. He's DNF'd in 5 of 16 races. That is, I'm sure, to some percentage blamable on the car, perhaps. But at the same time, if he kept it on the track, I really don't think we'd be having this discussion about him. I
Yeah.
really don't. We'd be like, well, he's with Williams and he's in the like low teens. That to me seems like that's about where you end up.
Well, I think that's what more or less like what Williams' messaging has been, that like he's had some really costly, like literally costly, like cost a lot of money
Yeah, it's
mistakes.
expensive.
It's very expensive for a team that doesn't have as many resources as like Mercedes and Red Bull have. But he's like steadily improving, and then something like this happens, and it's hard to sell that to people that are watching the sport. Like, is
Yeah.
he really steadily improving? He just crashed his entire, like both sides of his car hit the wall, and it was complete driver error. And a race, I don't think he's ever raced in Japan before, so maybe you give him like a
Hmm.
slight like forgiveness for that, whereas most of these other drivers have, and including the younger drivers who maybe have in other series. But if you compare his results just to his teammate Alex Albon, who is, I think by all accounts, like he is just a better driver. He has more experience. He's raced in different cars in F1. He's raced at this track more times. Like he's obviously having a better season, but he's had 2 DNFs and has finished in the points, I think 4 or 5 times. So he's obviously doing much worse than his teammate, which I think it's difficult to compare because it is Albon, but that's something that, you know, F1 teams look at because they're driving the same equipment. Um, but yeah, it's very interesting to see what happens next, because he also had the crash during the race with Bottas, and Bottas's radio message was so funny. It was like the most like what the fuck just happened message of I have ever heard. It was like just complete frustration, but also genuinely like what happened, because I don't even know what just happened. Like where did that car come from?
Yeah, we're I'm trying to be kind, but even when I'm kind, I want you to notice that the best possible read on Logan Sargent's situation is he's improving, but that improvement is punctuated with ridiculously expensive crashes. I mean, that's hard to sell, man. That is really hard to sell.
Yeah. So Logan private until further notice. We'll see where he
Yeah,
ranks at the end of the year. Um,
you you don't get to drive the tank in this army.
Maybe he
You
will
do not.
get dishonorably discharged from Formula One.
Uh, it's entirely possible. And again, this goes back to the question we were just talking about, where you go, okay, um, does the American market really absolutely love this guy? Is
I
he?
don't even see him doing media in America. Like I saw one, I think maybe Nate Saunders wrote an article that he was interviewed for, I want to say like 2 months ago.
Yeah,
That's really the only media I've seen him do. I haven't seen him do any of the other things that you would kind of expect. I know like they'll be in Austin in a month. It'll be interesting to see if they do any sort of like PR push around that.
yeah,
But it is interesting. Maybe there's a reason why. Maybe he's not super comfortable doing media. Maybe he's just not, you know, they want him to focus on driving and not so much worry about all the other stuff. But it does seem like if the reason that he's in Formula One is monetary and PR benefits. Like, why isn't he doing more? And there could be a valid reason. I don't know, but yeah, it's interesting.
Again, who am I looking at? We have a glut of talented young drivers. And are you one of them?
Right.
Clearly. Like, are you clearly more talented than the guys that I'm looking at on other teams who are at or around your age or levels of experience and are doing better? That's a hard sell for him. So I don't know. We'll come around. This is me trying to be kind. We can be mean when he crashes again.
I like this question from Lurky McLurkly. Is George now officially the naughtiest lad?
Well, I'm going to combo this with another question, okay?
Okay.
Which is from Holy Venom. Does Oscar have permanent best lad status? Only good vibes from him. No one has permanent best lad status. We believe in works, not just faith around here, Jessica. Okay, we need to see the track record. So again, your record is your record. You're evaluated every day. There is no memory. We have to focus on the present. So at the moment, is George now officially the naughtiest lad? I'm gonna let you call this one because I have a call in the other one.
Me or the audience?
You can naughtiest lad.
I mean, he's being very naughty. I feel like Austin Powers when I use the word naughty. Yeah, I think I can't think of a naughtier lad. If that answers your question.
At the moment, I would go ahead and say naughty lad. I have a little bit of an AV assist here, by the way, because I don't think that Oscar Piastri, being from Australia, could be the best lad. That just feels wrong, right? I need you to be sort of tripped out. I need you to be sort of in a club in Bali with all those sweaty, drunk, and extremely ecstatic Australians, where I know you want to be, right?
Yeah.
Dancing to something extremely like, I don't know, Tame Impala. I think you should just let this happen and join me in awarding Oscar Piastri Best Bloke status. That's right. Best Bloke
New
status.
Award.
You got it. I would make this more emphatic, but the profanities routinely employed by Australians would take us and demonetize us instantly from any and all platforms of legitimate status. So I'm just going to go ahead and say yes. Best Bloke to Oscar Piastri, who just doing beautiful work, man. Absolutely beautiful.
He really
work.
is.
I'm so happy. I love it when somebody gets their first podium because I don't know, man. You might not get another one. Like the sport is that tenuous and things change that quickly. So congratulations to him. In all sincerity, it's been fun watching him develop, and he's been, I think, the best part of a really good story already in McLaren's resurgence this year.
I think the second naughtiest lad this week was Pierre Gasly, who does not win the award and is no longer in contention for the award because he did what he was supposed to do, but he was not happy about it. He swapped places with Esteban Ocon, his teammate, who reportedly they aren't the best of friends, I guess. I don't really know how much truth there is to that, but his race engineer asked him to swap back and he was not going to do it until the very last minute, and his radio messages were not happy, and his race engineer kept telling him hey, let's just talk about this when you get back because everyone can hear this. And he finally did it, but it was almost very, very naughty.
I feel for the race engineer in those spots because how on earth are you going to tell this person driving 200 miles an hour, right, at the far limit of control? I need you to calm down.
Yeah.
I need you to, you're already in the most insane position in the world. And then we've asked you to do something which is obviously extremely angering to what you want to do.
Yeah. I want to talk about something that happened on the podium, Spencer, which is that Japan had trophies with lip recognition technology. Did you see this?
I did. Yeah.
What? Apparently they programmed these trophies to know which driver's lips were kissing them so that they could display the color of that driver's flag after they won. And I'm wondering if this is all just complete bullshit and they actually just programmed it to be orange for Max Verstappen because they knew he would probably win. But what? How did they get all of these drivers' lip imprints?
Or if this is just,
and where can I
first
find
of
them?
all,
just kidding.
Wouldn't it be easier to just program, just be like, okay, make them orange and blue, right?
Yeah.
Make this orange, just do that. and
like
then
the
this one will
Mets.
be red.
Yeah.
That would be much easier, I would think, as opposed to creating an entire lip recognition machine. Also, can I tell you the creepiest part of this?
Yes.
Somebody's working on a lip print recognition machine. That's the creepiest part of this for me. That this is a priority for some Japanese scientists. That they're like, you know what's very important right now? I need to know who has been kissing this. Like that's
Like
wow.
what else could this technology, like they always say like, oh, Formula One, like the forefront of technology in automobile making and manufacturing. Like, these cars, you learn so much about cars from these Formula One cars, but like this maybe is a technology that we don't need. I can't think of another use for it. I'm not sure if anyone can. If you can and it's PG, you can tweet it at me.
So
But
just imagine next year Stefano Domenicali rolling out for race one, and he goes, "We have something new this year, everybody. If you look, these cars are now keyed to each driver's individual lip print, so that in order to begin the car, as with all things in F1, it involves love, and you must kiss the car to make it start." I'm joking, but I'm not. Like, they would totally do something like that.
it's so strange, but it worked because it turned orange for Max. So, hey,
Imagine, by the
credit
way,
to them. And he didn't break his trophy this week.
I mean, you got to go out and kiss your like Subaru Outback to make it start every morning.
I
You got to walk
truly,
out there and be like, "I'm mad at you, but I got to kiss you anyway."
you know what? Maybe this is like for when you're at work and you have leftovers in Tupperware and
Mm-hmm.
your coworkers keep stealing them. But I just can't think of a use for lip technology that we couldn't just use fingerprints for. And similarly, I was at Whole Foods yesterday and there's like a palm scanner there now.
Uh-huh.
Apparently that's a thing. Again, like fingerprints, like everyone already has my biometrics. It's all out there. You can find
Yeah.
that. I don't know why we're testing new body parts. When will it end?
Yeah, this is leading up to, I'm telling you, this is leading up to Max Verstappen having to pucker up and kiss his car to make it start. And the drivers being like, "We are very against kissing the car." Except Valtteri's like, "I like my car. I will kiss it."
And they're like, Valtteri, no, no
No, stop
tongue,
there.
no
So
tongue.
yeah, no tongue. No tongue. Do not grope the car.
Anywho, from Ryan B, is it time for Lance Stroll to go? Ooh, we are being
No.
really mean today, aren't we? We are
No, it is not.
demoting Logan Sergeant. We're asking George Russell and Sergio Perez what's wrong with them mentally. Lance
With
Stroll.
Checo, that's a good question, and I may want to talk about that after this. Just
Okay.
a warning in advance. But like legitimately, did you expect someone to fire their son?
Yeah. I mean,
Do
Kirk
you?
Ferentz
Why did he get involved?
has been denying that pleasure for Iowa fans for years.
Right. Go look at the number of times that's actually happened in real life, that somebody has fired their son. Now go look at this. How many times has somebody purchased a large commercial enterprise, put their son in charge of it, and then said, it's not working, and fired them? That's just not, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Personally, I'm like, yeah, you should probably get rid of him. That's probably what you should do if you wanted to have a better racing team, especially, again, given the large glut of young potential that there is in this sport. However, that's not what happens. That's not, like, you're not describing a reality that exists anywhere in this world, okay? It's just not there. Fail sons exist for a reason.
Yeah,
They
they
do.
do.
It's a dynamic that just happens over and over and over again.
Especially in sports.
And it's not like Lance Stroll's been Logan Sergeant ineffective. That's the problem with Lance Stroll, is that he hasn't been bad enough for it to be a joke and make Lawrence Stroll look like a joke.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's your answer right there. Whether it's time for him to go or not time for him to go, he will
No,
not be going.
no. Is it time? Irrelevant. It ain't happening.
Yeah. Not great though that they brought in Fernando Alonso to race the same car as him. That has not been great for him. Maybe it's time for Alonso to go, because that's the problem, is that now you can't like just blame the car, blame the manufacturer, blame, the engineers, because you've got a pretty decent guy, a pretty decent car for this other guy who's driving it really well.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
now you're comparing it to someone who's been in F1 for several years now and has never really like gotten to the next level.
Yeah.
So
Guy was currently 4th in points. And
yeah.
whereas you're currently 10th in points.
Yeah.
Behind, I would point out, rookie Oscar Piastri.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not good for you either.
Nope. Not good. All right. Are you gonna give us your Checo take now?
They go because this is to me like a very large question that may be beyond the realm of anybody except sports psychologists and counselors. How do we fix Checo? Brutal. This is from A Raphael 52. Brutal. He's continuing the Mexican sporting tradition of getting close to the top before unraveling in the most brutal fashion imaginable. See any World Cup between 94 and 2018 and the last World Baseball Classic. First of all, Mr. Raphael 52, we've obviously touched a nerve with a larger story about international Mexican sporting fate. And let me just say, I know it may be brutal, but no one's ever watched like a really good Mexican team at the international level and thought they're not cool. No, they're always cool. You're like, even when they're like I am a United States men's national team fan, and every time we play Mexico, I'm like, oh man, I like fighting with these guys. This is the best. But on the specific issue of how do we fix Checo, I don't think nobody's far gone. Nobody's past the pale. He's shown the ability to win. That's like job one. Have you shown the ability to win? Yeah.
Yes.
Has he shown the ability to be an effective number 2 driver? Yeah, he's already demonstrated that.
He won Max for Champion.
Max for
Champion, the championship in 2021. Like that was all him.
Right. Yeah. In fact, I would argue like he is in that role. He was already the best number 2 driver I've seen in a while in terms of being, the enforcer, being the guy who can block, being the guy who works well within your race strategy, being the guy who is competitive while never really threatening your status too much. The thing is, nobody wants to retire as the greatest number 2 driver of all time. They want to do their own thing. And that's really, if you go, well, what's the next step? That is the only step remaining for Checo, is that he has to become the number 1 driver somewhere else. Because I don't think, like if I had to guess, where's the real stress here? The real stress for Checo, it's not like the money's a problem. He's fabulously wealthy. It's not like the team's a problem. He's got the second best machine anyway out there.
Well, not like the team as in like the equipment on the road.
Right.
More so the team as in the team politics. Yeah.
Your politics are your only issue, and your role is your only issue. We've seen you perform and do everything asked of you. Everything asked of you. The only thing that has to change is the situation. You'll say, well, where does he go? I'm like, I have no idea. Absolutely none, because the top is so saturated at this point with people that are deemed either irreplaceable or, too much is invested in them already to have them move. Okay, we'll go to Mercedes. Nobody's moving from Mercedes.
Yeah.
Right? They're not going anywhere. Go to McLaren. McLaren's full up. McLaren has, as we said, right now, as good a pair of drivers in terms of their co-working relationship as anyone on the grid. So where does he go? I'm not sure. I think he's got a very difficult position because I know what the answer is for him career-wise, but right now, situationally, it's not happening.
Yeah, tragically.
Yeah, it's. We might have come full circle around to your Mexican international sporting tragedy theory, right?
You're not wrong about that. There was one other question about Perez, which is worse, being told to sit in timeout in the car until the race is over, or sending him back out there to get blue flagged the entire time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I'll also say, it's like trying to make a decision past 11 p.m. Right now, it's 11 p.m. for him at Red Bull. Get some sleep. Wake up in the morning. Make a better decision. Okay?
Yeah. Don't go to the Notre Dame Ohio State game. That's the decision I would have not made.
I thought y'all looked fine.
Yeah, that's the problem. They actually looked really good, and then they lost.
You just made one dumb. Hey, you DNF'd. You made one dumb mistake. You put a good car in the wall. You're going to come back next week.
What's the F1 equivalent of having not enough players on the field for like a game?
Ferrari. You Ferrari'd it.
Oh my God!
If you want to know what Notre Dame did, you 100% Ferrari'd it.
You're right, and I hate it. No.
Great machine, great talent, crap execution when it counted. That I hate to say it, but Notre Dame and Ferrari both being great legacy brands with a recent history of dysfunction, it's too on the nose for me to enjoy making it, but I have to say it.
All right. See you next time.